and
was
actually
looking for
exploring
things.
things
So it's
that
ancient history, there's
classicists
philosophy,
don't normally
there's
get to
literature.
explore. You know, as a classicist, you don't really know much about Egypt or Persia or Turkey or Sanskrit, you know, or ancient India or modern Arabic, and they kind of thought of just branching out a bit, kind of going beyond kind of your average classics course was pretty exciting. I think that's probably what made me stick with classics and Oriental studies. One thing to stress about the course structure would be that there are two ways of doing classics and Oriental studies. One is a 3-year course and one is a 4-year course. In the 3-year course, you take Oriental Studies as your main option. You do Oriental Studies entirely for the first year and you do your first public exams in Oriental Studies, and then you pick up classics after this. The second 4-year option is the more popular option. This is what more colleges offer and it's what most people do, where you start off basically as a classicist with the rest of the classicists, and you do mods after 5 terms, and then after that, in your 3rd and 4th years, you pick up your Oriental language.
I started off as a classicist and had not much idea about Oriental studies. And in a tutorial, my tutor told me about the reception of Aristotle in the Arab-speaking world. And I got interested in that and decided to learn Arabic to immerse myself a bit more in that.
Classics and Oriental Studies kind of lets you get into this groove of modern thinking about the ancient world.
For your first 1.5 years, there's a couple of set things you have to do. There's like the Aeneid or the Iliad, and paper that's called Text and Context, where you do loads of different texts, material culture, and try to sort of connect everything. And once you've done this, you sort of have had sort of an impression of the different areas of classical studies, and then you can sort of specialize, and you can choose from a whole range of things. So there's ancient history, there's philosophy, there's literature.
I ended up doing mostly literature, and I've always been mostly interested in literature. But I think I assumed that I would do lots of Latin literature because that's what was most familiar to me when I came to university. But I've actually completely specialised in Greek literature and then Egyptian literature as well. And I basically learned Greek from scratch at university, which is one of the great things about the Oxford course, is that you can study these ancient languages even though you've never done it before.
You've got 2 tutorials a week, that means 2 essays a week. For classics and Oriental studies, there were a couple of terms where I only had one essay a week, but all the language classes and lectures and sort of reading texts in Arabic, which was probably more in terms of hours more than writing an essay.
So you have a lot of language classes. So I had intensive Greek classes 4 times a week, or maybe even 5 times a week at the beginning of the course, along with 2 Latin classes, as well as essays and reading and going to lectures and things. And then after the first set of public exams, after what are called mods, I picked up the Oriental language and started learning Egyptian. And that again required 3 language classes a week, as well as additional lectures in Egyptian culture and civilization and history.
The papers that you do are either classics or Oriental studies. They don't really merge, but you have the opportunity to write a thesis, and I wrote on the influence of Aristotelian thought in an Arabic philosopher.
If you're interested in archaeology, there are also fieldwork opportunities in Italy, in Turkey sometimes, in Egypt if you're an Egyptologist, in Greece. You just have to keep your eyes open. Classics and Oriental studies at Oxford gives you the chance to explore these areas that you didn't know and you hardly knew existed. Oxford has amazing libraries. It's completely unparalleled. You can use the Bodleian for your main classics collections. You can use the Sackler, which is great because on the ground floor and the lower floor you have classics, and you go upstairs and there's an entire floor on Egyptology and the ancient Near East. So you have that combined in one library. It's just fantastic.
The Ashmolean is the university museum, and they've got a huge collection of statues and especially of casts of originals that are interesting to look at. And also there's quite a lot on medieval Islamic art as well, so that's always an interesting resource.
There's also the Oriental Institute, which has its own library, and if you're interested in doing Sanskrit or Turkish or Persian, these are other options. One of the things I found most exciting was that in terms of a weekly essay, say, you can be sent a question by your tutor, and you might know nothing about the subject at the beginning of the week. You know, it might be on some work of Greek literature you've never heard of, or a bit of Roman history that you know nothing about. And then by the end of the week, you come away having learned a great deal about it, not only through reading and writing the essay and thinking about it, but also about the discussion then in the tutorial.
First, you're forced to prepare properly because it's so embarrassing if you're unprepared for a tutorial. And second, you have the chance to ask someone who's a specialist in the field the question that have arisen. And but the most important and most sort of fun thing is that you often have to engage in a discussion, have you maybe defend your own points that you sort of, or your own opinion that you came up with.
What I'm looking for in applicants is a combination of talent, commitment and imagination. If people have got those three, they're doing pretty well. To try and make the interview procedure as fair as possible, what many tutors do, and what I do myself, is to give applicants the chance in advance of the interview to read for maybe 20 minutes a passage or a series of passages, or to look at a related image, and then to just ask them during the interview questions about that material.
The most important thing if you want to come and study pretty much anything at Oxford, but particularly a subject which involves so much reading and thinking in different languages as well, is to read as much as you can. You have to read, and reading has to come naturally to you. You can't sit and think, oh, I have to force myself to read, you know, this article or this magazine or this book or whatever. You have to read and all the time think about what you're reading.
We're not looking for people who are going to rehash stuff that they have picked up at school, for example. So it's important to listen to the question and to try to answer that particular question, and to think about that question before you answer it, not to just rush into answering the question that you would have liked to have been asked.
I'd say it's completely fine that you haven't studied these languages at A-level. It's basically unheard of that somebody might have done Egyptian or Sanskrit or Arabic at A-level. And there, if you think that you have an interest in these things, go have a look on the university website, read the student profiles, read what the course actually entails, and think about whether you can imagine yourself doing this.
I think classics is a degree where a lot of avenues are open for you. I mean, I know people who go to the city, obviously. There's people who go into the media, journalism.
It's seen by employers as a very valuable, rigorous degree that really sets people up for anything.
I think that's the good thing about an Oxford Classics degree, that it's generally well respected because it's known for being demanding, and I think that's a good thing.
I got funding to stay for the Masters, so I decided to stay for the Masters, and the following year I thought, well, no, there's still a bit more going on in the classical world. Let's see what else it can do, where else it can go. So I applied for the DPhil and I got funding for the DPhil. So I stayed for the DPhil.
Often people do go to law school, do something else afterwards, I think. So you can do whatever you like. And obviously knowing Arabic is not something that makes you less employable.
The people might be dead and gone, but there is an extraordinary amount of life left in the subject, and we're discovering new things all the time.